Okay, welcome everybody that's coming in. What we'll always do is just leave a couple of minutes at the start of the webinar so that everybody can filter through as they're coming from meetings, and sometimes Zoom kind of queues people up one by one. As we're waiting for everybody to join, I'm wondering if you can help me with a debate that we're having in the Investors in People office at the moment. Decorations up or wait until December? I'd be really interested to hear where you stand on the decorations debate through the chat, and maybe introduce yourselves as well and where you're dialing in from. Yeah, so who started celebrating Christmas already? I have to confess, through I think what is peer pressure, I put up one of my little trees downstairs this lunchtime. Okay, so I can see the numbers ticking up. Thank you to everybody that's joining us. If you didn't hear my intro just now, we're just waiting a couple of minutes for everybody to filter through. In the meantime, please get involved in the chat. Do introduce yourselves, maybe where you're dialing in from, and where you stand on the decorations up in November versus decorations up in December debate. I'd be very curious to find out. I think we've had over 200 registrations, so good to see those numbers still ticking up. And I'll just wait a couple more minutes for everybody to come through. Thanks, Kelly. 1st of December for you. So you're in the December camp.
I'm with Kelly.
Yeah, another person for December. There must be people in the audience that have decorations up already, I'm sure. It can't just be Investors in People. No judgment here.
For our run, Beth, I see lots of houses with Christmas trees in the windows, so there must be a community that believes in November.
Absolutely. Get the Christmas tracks on early, that's what I say. Thanks, Suzanne. So you've said December for you. Amazing. Well, I can see those numbers are really ticking up now, so we won't wait any longer. We'll get started. Thank you for joining us today. Our big topic is the one that's on everyone's minds right now. How do we win the race for talent? So I've heard it variably called the Great Resignation, the Big Reshuffle. I've even heard it being framed now as the Great Flirtation. I think that's my personal favourite. But it's top of all of our minds. How do we attract talent? How do we keep them? And how do we engage them? And when we were doing a practice session for this, I can't remember which of you said it, but I wrote it down because I think it's brilliant. Essentially what we're talking about is how do we get everybody on the bus, the right people in the right places, and get them on the journey. So luckily we have a fantastic panel that will supply us with lots of practical takeaways and a range of top tips from lots of different perspectives. So I'll go to them now for some brief introductions. I'll go to you first, James.
Everybody, I'm James Bailey. I'm founder of Wave Refrigeration, an employee-owned company who transitioned to employee ownership 12 months ago and has made full complete transition as of last week. I move on to pastures new in the new year, safe in the knowledge that we have an absolutely fantastic team and we have won the race indeed for a lot of good talent, and hopefully I'll be able to share how we've managed and we were able to retain our talent.
Fantastic, thanks James. And to you next, Louise.
Hi, my name's Louise. I work for Arnold. We're Europe's largest independent car retailer. We have about 11,000 staff and a network of over 250 branches spread across the UK. I work within the employee engagement team in Arnold Clark, and I'm going to talk today a little bit how we have looked at flexible working as a means of that race for talent and widening that pool for talent as well.
Fantastic, thanks Louise. And Jane.
Hello everyone, I'm Jane. I'm the Chief Exec at Working Families, and we're a charity. We exist to remove the barriers that working parents and carers face in the workplace. And we do that in 3 ways. We have a free legal advice line. And last year we helped individually 3,100 people. But what's most important is that we had 1.6 million unique views of our advice pages, which are constantly updated with what's ever new in terms of employment law. And we want to empower working parents and carers to negotiate for their own flexible working. We also work with employers to make sure that they can implement, create, sustain, build flexible working, family-friendly flexible working, and then we use those two views. What we know is what we know works and what we know doesn't work to drive the positive policy change that we want to see in the working world.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jane. Thank you. And Paul.
Everyone, my name is Paul Devoy. I'm the Chief Executive of Investors and People. We're a not-for-profit social enterprise celebrating our 30th birthday. First 25 years we were a government scheme, but we're now a social enterprise. And the way that we make work better is encouraging as many businesses as we can to invest in their people, because we know that organisations who invest in their people are more sustainable and more productive, and create good jobs for their employees, which has a positive impact on society. So our ambition is to create a thriving community organisations who believe what we believe and to help them achieve their people development objectives.
Thanks, Paul. And I'm Beth, so I'm the people lead at Investors in People. And when I'm not hosting lovely webinars like this, I look after our internal team and our expert network of practitioners. So audience, thank you so much for joining us today. I really do want to make sure that this session is super engaging and useful to you. So keep the engagement coming through the chat, share your thoughts and comments as we go through the different sections, and do also post your questions in the Q&A. So we have a nice juicy Q&A section at the end so we can get through all your questions. And before we dive into the individual questions that we have prepared for you, I was wondering if you could share with us how you feel you're doing in the race for talent. And you can do that with a word, a comment, an emoji. Just give us a picture of how you're feeling currently and pop that through on the chat. And I'll keep an eye on those as they pop up. Okay, so if I can start with you, James, perhaps you could take us through your journey at Wave and how you foster a culture that retains key talent.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Beth. When I set out and set up Wave, I did so, and once we started and we'd established contracts with our bigger customers, it was a case of what would I want from an employer. So I took the best bits from previous employers, but centralised a positive working culture as the guide to our strategy. Recruitment began with tried and tested professionals who'd been within the industry for a lot of years, who could hit the road running, so to speak. But after a period of time, and as we carried on building and growing all the time, we hit a block which said, right, we need to sort of invest and grow our own people. And I've got to say, I'm the first person to hold my hand up and say 5 years ago, I believed what we hear in the press, Generation Z, lazy snowflake generation. And I have been proven so wrong. It is unbelievable. And I am absolutely proud of the training program that we have. So we have, within Wave, we have 9 of the team who have either come through the training mechanism at Wave or who are within it. And what fascinates me day by day, by allowing an absolute open culture, where there's a culture that we can be challenged, as a leader, as my co-directors within the business, our team know that they can raise challenges. We have a very much an open door policy. We allow people to make mistakes, especially our younger people, because it's making mistakes where lessons are learned and people become better. And I think in terms of the retention rate, we haven't seen any of our trainees, current or those who have come out of the training machine, actually depart Wave as a business. I hope they never will do. And I think part of that is the fact that we are employee owned. What solidified our journey, or my decision to go employee owned, was actually our first Investors in People assessment, which taught us a lot. Taught me and my co-directors a lot about where we were. We achieved with silver status. We knew we were a good company. We knew that before, but it also allowed us to hone in on how do we become better? And obviously we went through COVID and furlough periods. We furloughed a lot of the team. We brought the team back naturally. We realised how much the business meant to everybody. But since being employee owned, and I think, you know, and I do sit from on the side of a real socialist perspective here, where I do believe in fairness and equity for people and the environment, all in equal measure. What we've actually got now is a team of people who don't clock watch. People generally come in early, they stay late, they're engaged, they're motivated, and yes, there's the fringe benefits that go with employee ownership, and that's that a trust company owns the shares on behalf of the employees. And I'm pleased to say in November's pay that all our team benefited from a good bonus, you know, so it brings it all home. And in terms of, you know, that's the reason everyone comes to work to earn money. But I'd like to think that at Wave we're a little bit different. There's now nearly 1,000 employee-owned businesses who have set up employee ownership trusts, and I think there's a real unique synergy between those companies and what the aims and aspirations of investors in people are all about, which is all about making work better, improving leadership, enhancing organisational culture.
Absolutely, thanks, James. And I'm sure many in the audience might be like myself in kind of people or HR roles. I can see there's been lots of comments saying about how, you know, there's some real challenges out there at the moment. What advice would you give to someone perhaps like me, maybe that's working in a talent sourcing team, about how to open up the possibilities like accessing young talent? If they were potentially talking to the previous version of you that was maybe more skeptical about that, what could they try?
Well, I'll take the skeptical version first. Our first trainee in the business, he actually worked for us, did Sam, who's now our engineering manager. 4.5 years ago, he came for a little bit of experience over the summer. I've known Sam's father a long time from a previous employer of his, and I used to do a lot of work for him and the wider team. And I just saw a simple LinkedIn post. I needed some help. Sam was available, met him, and very rapidly, I had no, what will Sam be like in our business? And I'm talking about some as an individual, which I possibly shouldn't do, but he's a shining star. He's going to go all the way to the top. And from my perspective, he very rapidly showed me that everything in my psyche and everything in my beliefs about Generation Z was absolutely false. They're crying out for an opportunity. So from the the paradigm that I had was quickly changed effectively. Now, sorry, Beth, what was the second part of the question? Apologies.
No, I think it was just that, really. You know, what advice do you have for people that are in talent roles, perhaps to get leaders thinking differently about sources of talent, exactly as you've described?
I think I've just got one addition there. I think what we've done really well as a business, we've got a blend of what I call really academically gifted trainees, those who've gone and got really high caliber, high graded degrees. And we've also got school leavers, all very intelligent, all with their own skills and strengths. And the blend, what I would say, I wouldn't focus on necessarily your 22 straight out of university graduates. Actually, there's a lot of good people who don't want to follow an academic pathway, who can be collected at 16, 17, 18. And what we find is a real blend of different skill sets throughout our organisation.
Brilliant, thanks, James. And I feel like it would be remiss of me not to recognise someone in our team who came through a similar route. And it's thanks to him that we're on this webinar today. He runs all our events, Scott. He's lurking here in that dark square. Okay, thank you for that. If I can go to you next, Louise, could you give us some tips maybe on what you've learned about recruiting at Arnold Clark? Oh, you're on mute.
There we go. So some time ago now, as a business, we set our objective to be an employer of choice, which for us meant really going back to basics and looking at the whole of the employment life cycle, really. We knew we weren't winning the war for talent, and we were having issues retaining talent within the business as well. So we knew we had to address those issues. In addition to that, we had to look at issues gender balance and inclusion within our particular area of sort of retail environment within the motor industry. So we wanted to really challenge that and move away from what had become the norm in that industry. So typically male dominated, long hours culture, and to try and break down those barriers. What we found was that most of those conversations that we're having came back around to flexibility, and what people are looking for is that flexibility. Obviously, having come out of the pandemic, well, not coming out of the pandemic, but working through the pandemic, and we all continue to do so, that again has then changed the landscape in terms of how we look at recruiting that talent and having that access to that pool of talent, and retaining those employees in the business as well. So what we've done is look at what we can offer from a flexible working point of view, so that all of our employees have access to a flexible working arrangement. And we did that by going out and looking at focus groups with our employees and our managers. So we spoke to our employees to find out what was important to them, and what they found would be the most helpful thing in terms of a flexible working arrangement, and also to our managers within that as well, and from a practical point of view. We then came up with 3 different types of flexible working within the business that we could offer to our staff and to future employees as well, which we hope really sort of embed that flexible working within the culture of the business, for people currently here, but also for people joining the business or looking to join the business. We have like a fully flexible way of working, which is suits people who can work from home most of the time. So people like our software developers, our IT team, our wages department. So there's very little requirement for those people to attend a physical workplace. We have our hybrid approach for those people that like flexibility that home working brings, but they also enjoy that coming into the office and working and connecting with their colleagues as well. And then our sort of most or newest addition to the flexible working side of things was our flexible on-premise approach, which we've had to introduce this for our employees who would find it very difficult to operationally work from home. So we are a retail business with physical showrooms, so we have to have people based in there, like salespeople, technicians, that sort of thing. But we also recognise that people require that flexibility to have that work-life balance, and that's what people are looking for. So the scheme and the approach that we introduced on that side of things was that people can request up to 3 hours leave, however many times they want to during the course of a month. It doesn't matter what it's for, what the reason's for. It could be a parents' evening, it could be a football match, it could be to go for dinner with their friends. But the fact is that they've got that flexibility that can fit in around their work-life balance. We've seen that be a huge success. We've had a massive take up of over 7,000 applications since we launched it in July with our employees. So I'm pleased to say the majority of those have been approved. So that's showing us that that's something that our employees wanted. And we hope that our new people that join the business as well take on board that, you know, from day one, flexible working is part of our culture at Arnold Clark.
Fantastic. Some great ideas there, Louise. Thank you. Okay. And I guess a follow-up question for me would be, can you talk us through obviously your wins, but also maybe some of the wobbles? Because sometimes it's those things that don't go as planned that we can all learn the most from.
Yeah, absolutely. Whilst it's been a success, it's still kind of early days in terms of coaching our managers. I'd say that's probably been the biggest challenge for us to this change in culture, to be that, you know, it should really always be a yes, unless it absolutely can't work at all. And we really want our managers to have that approach. And that has been a bit of a shift for them. So we really are working with them to coach them so that this no strings attached approach. We get asked a lot of questions about, well, how many applications can people put in? Can they really put an unlimited amount in? And the answer is yes, because we felt that putting any sort of restrictions on it would just look like we were paying lip service to flexible working. We wanted it to genuinely be flexible working. And I still have conversations on a regular basis with managers who say, well, can't they work that time back? And we say, well, no, that's not the whole point of flexible working. It should be that it's not to be worked back and it is to be paid, because the point is that it's flexible and it's giving them that work-life balance. So the sort of wobbles for us, continue to be changing that culture and driving that through with managers. And we analyse the data every month to look and drill through any reasons that are declined, why they've been declined, to pick up with that manager and speak to that, and really try and sort of change that culture, one manager at a time in some ways. But that's kind of our biggest wobble with it, really. But what we're also finding is that a lot of our managers have really embraced the culture of it and are really embracing that move forward. And what we're looking to do is to get those managers maybe to educate other managers on how they make it work so well for their branch. Because a lot of the work environments are the same, it's just in different locations. So hopefully that sort of peer influence will come into it as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm sure that's reassured lots of people listening that maybe want to try it and aren't quite sure what might come up. So I know you said it's early days, but have you seen any results in terms of retention or maybe well-being metrics as a result of this?
We haven't measured wellbeing metrics at this stage with it. What we are sort of focusing on is sort of looking at the how many applications and the sorts of reasons that are coming through for that. So what we've seen is the most popular reasons being medical reasons or personal reasons, which is helping us to understand that it's those little things that help. If people can fit those into their lives much more easily than having the anxiety about going and asking the manager for time off, they've got the system to request it, that they are by far every month the most popular reasons. So we're quite confident that that's obviously helping our employees in terms of their well-being because of that work-life balance. But that's something that we'll definitely look to do, as our plan is to sort of continually review and get back out there and speak to our employees. The biggest thing for us is that we want this to be about our employees and to have come from our employees, and to keep speaking to them and listening to what their views are and taking those on board.
Fantastic, thank you. And I can imagine it is these kinds of initiatives that make the big difference with retention, aren't they? I mean,
yes.
If you get a group of people around a dining table, statistics tell us that probably half of those people are thinking about moving jobs. But it's those that are saying, you know, I can take the time off if I need to, and that is paid. Those are the people that are saying, actually, I'm quite happy where I am. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I think it does make a massive difference, and for people to know that it's not just for certain groups of employees, that, you know, like I say, the reason doesn't really matter. It's more that, you know, can the business accommodate it on this occasion? If we can, absolutely.
Amazing, thanks, Louise.
Okay.
And if I can go to you next, Jane. I know through your work at Working Families, you must see key themes emerging around this. So what can the audience learn from these that will help them with their talent challenges? Oh, you're on mute. Happens to the best of us.
Yes, you know, I do it every day, I suspect. And sometimes I think people would like me to be muted. But so yeah, it's fascinating listening to James and Louise and their focus on people, which of course is what we're here to talk about, but it's that focus on individuals that I find such an interesting piece. We did some work in the summer and for our National Work Life Week, and the employees that or the people that we asked when we did a poll, 85% of them said that work-life balance was hugely important to them. And it was going to be one of the things that they would be looking at when they looked at their next role. So, you know, just to reiterate, around a dining room table, 50% of the people are thinking about a new job. Well, 85% of them are thinking that in that new job, one of the things that they're going to be looking for is an ability to be a complete human, to work hard, but also to have time to do other things. And for us, there are kind of 4 things which are critical. And between them, Louise and James have mentioned everything about that flexible working. One is job design. You have to know what's possible and what's not possible. We believe there is flexibility in every job, but there's not the same flexibility in every job. So some roles can be done remotely, some can't. In almost every role, there is an element that may be able to be done remotely. But certainly there's lots of other opportunities, part-time, job share, team rostering, all of those kinds of things that allow you to see what's possible and what's not possible. Secondly, the culture, which again, both James and Louise have mentioned, it's around understanding what's possible and for there to be a culture to support that and to encourage it. And if you don't have that culture, it's incredibly difficult. One of the things that can influence culture is what we like to call real models. So if the most senior man in the business says, I'm going to pick up my kids from school this afternoon, that sends an extraordinarily powerful message. So it's about that culture and about those real models. And then, of course, line manager training. Line managers get such a rubbish reputation sometimes, and it's so unfair on them because they're trying to do all of the things they've always done, trying to get the same results, but they're not being given the knowledge about how to make changes. And change can be scary for all of us. So those that really are the 4 things that we think are most important. And certainly for so many organizations, again, the polling that we did for National Work Life Week, almost everybody said that what drove promotion within their own organization was a long hours culture. And for us, what's absolutely critical is let's look at what it is that people need to achieve in their roles, and are they achieving that? Let's look at outcomes as opposed to that presenteeism, where the presenteeism is sitting with your bottom on a particular desk or having that Zoom face permanently all day.
Thank you. That's so interesting to hear from your research and also from your experience. I imagine, sorry, I don't know if you heard that car horn, do apologise. So sitting from the perspective of someone maybe who's really had that resonate with them, they want to make that transition culturally from long hours to being more output focused. What would you recommend maybe as a first step or a place to start?
As a first step, we would recommend looking at job design. And on our website, there's some free tools that people can use to have a look at each job and to understand what could be done differently and how it could be done differently. There are some fantastic examples also out there in the world. For example, there's an organisation called Zurich, and they have done some work with the Government Equalities Office and also with the Behavioural Insights team. And they are now advertising every single one of their roles. Within the job title, it says flexible part-time job share. And that has, for them, driven a significant increase in the numbers of people applying for roles. And that's men and women, not just mothers. So that's really interesting. And if you offer that up front to people, if they know that it's possible, working families, we have a strapline, which again is free for anybody to use, which is happy to talk flexible working. So if people, when they arrive for that job interview, have the confidence to know that if they raise something, it's not going to negatively impact on their possibilities of getting the job. That's absolutely critical. And then the other thing for us, I think, is the idea that flexibility is crucial at every stage of the employee life cycle. If you're coming to work as an apprentice and you need to do some training, you need that flexibility to get your training done, but you also need that face time with actually doing the job to do that learning. As you go through your life and different things happen to you, you need the flexibility. And then towards the end of your working life, you may not be wanting to work full time. And actually you may be wanting, one of the best ideas I ever heard was reverse mentoring, where you have a much more junior member of staff shadowing and working with a much older or more experienced, not older, a more experienced member of staff, and actually swapping responsibilities and understanding what their career path might look like within the business.
Amazing. Thank you, Jane. And I think it's also a really good reminder, obviously we're coming from a business focus here and how we can win the race for talent, but the real impact it makes on individual people in their lives, having that freedom and time to do, like you say, study or perhaps explore other business avenues. It's really is life-changing stuff. So Paul, I'll come to you next, last but certainly not least. What can we learn from the core purpose that investors in people of Make Work Better? And how does that give organisations an edge in the race for talent?
Yeah, so as I said in my introduction, we're a purpose-led organisation. And the reason that Investors in People was set up is that we know that there's a direct link between how you invest and develop and support and lead your people with your long-term sustainable organisational performance. And the best way to do that is to benchmark yourself against our framework, and it'll give you pointers about what you're doing well and what you're not doing so well, and that's always an opportunity for improvement. One area that's heavily focused on our framework is job design, and it just plays to the points that Jane was making. I'm a big advocate for flexible working, and I advocate it within our organisation. Have done very vigorously since we left government. So I don't care if you do your best work at 4 o'clock on a Sunday morning, but you want to take your kid, pick your kid up for school, or you have other care and responsibilities, whatever it might be. The only sort of heuristic that I ask is that your flexibility is not at the expense of someone else meeting an objective. And as long as that's the case, as long as you're not acting selfishly at the expense of someone else, you organise and design your own work in your own day, and that's entirely up to you. We measure people on outcomes. And I know that's quite an unusual paradigm, but I believe we've got to practice what we preach, and our productivity as an organisation, our performance has only gone up since we really got those kind of practices embedded. So there's lots of good advice you can get from our practitioners to help you implement flexible working, and getting assessed against our framework will also really help you do that. And I can say that we've done it ourselves. We've implemented flexible working in our company, and our retention is high, and we have very low sick absence, and people find that they can balance their work and their life, and it doesn't in fact, it helps performance. It doesn't negatively impact upon it. I think a lot of managers have to get out of the 9 to 5 Monday to Friday in the office mindset. It was designed for an industrial revolution when we all worked in factories. It just doesn't fit anymore, but somehow that's perceived to be that's some sort of norm that has to be protected. It's just complete nonsense in my view. And I think people after COVID are wise to that now, and they're quite rightly setting expectations of employers that they want a better reciprocal arrangement with work. And I think it's incumbent upon employers to look at it.
Thanks, Paul. And just to Jane's point earlier about leadership role modelling, I can say, not just because Paul's my manager, but he does an excellent job of that internally. So we'll speak openly about the priorities that you have with your family, Paul, or the reasons why you need flexibility. And I completely agree, that definitely sets the tone, and it just gives everybody a little bit more permission to have those conversations too. I think that's something that we've seen making a real difference internally as well.
Yeah.
I guess the theme that's kind of come up through a couple of your answers is around managers and the role that they have to play in this. I do think they sometimes do perhaps get a bit of a hard time, often in these conversations about flexibility and their role in that. Paul, do you have any suggestions or tips for those in the audience that are maybe supporting managers with this journey?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Beth. I think being a manager is such a hard job. I had my first management job when I was 24, and I'm now nearly 54, and I still find it really tough. The toughest part of my job, even to this day. People are wonderful, but also extremely complex creatures, and I don't think we give managers enough support to be able to do the job well. We seem to have another paradigm is that just because you're a brilliant nurse or an engineer or a lorry driver or whatever it might be, because you're excellent at that, somehow you'll just become a manager and you'll just pick it up. It's a really hard and skillful job, and we don't invest enough in people before they become managers to prepare them for it, and then we don't invest enough in them when they become a manager. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll get a 2-week management course in a hotel somewhere, but that doesn't cut it. It's a lifelong learning exercise, and I'm an absolute case in point. It's really hard, and it requires a lot of time and a lot of investment and a lot of support and a lot of skill. So, giving managers coaches to help them be better managers, best set up peer groups at investors and people where managers can come together and share their experiences and coach each other. We need to really, really support and invest in our managers, because if they're not okay, their team's not going to be okay. So it's that old story about when you have an emergency on a plane and they tell you to put the oxygen mask on first before you look after anyone else. It's the same thing with our managers. We need to look after them in order that they can then be in the best possible position to look after their team. And the stat I always quote is, in the UK, we've got 2.1 million accidental managers according to the Chartered Management Institute. So that are people that have been put in management positions without having been properly trained to do it. So it's no wonder that our productivity is lower than our G7 competitors. It's no wonder that we have the retention crisis that we've got at the minute, because people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses. So for me, I'm a massive advocate of lifelong development and support and training of our managers, because I don't think they get enough care and support and respect.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, it's a really important message there, I think. And certainly in my career, I found some of the hardest managers to work for were actually the ones that were probably suffering themselves the most from things like unrealistic workloads or conflicting priorities from above. So if you are struggling with retaining talent, or it's something that you want to look at, you think there's an opportunity there, perhaps another good place to start is actually talking to your managers about their experience of work, because working for a manager that's struggling could be one of the things that might cause someone to just have a quick look at LinkedIn or Indeed on their lunch break. So those are all of my questions that I had preset for the panel. So audience, it's time to emerge, throw your questions at us. You've got a brilliant panel here from lots of different perspectives, with lots of experience about these challenges and opportunities too. So please do pop your questions through on the Q&A. While your fingers are typing and your brains are whirring, I'll throw back another question to the panel. And that is, what do you think we should be thinking about now in the race for talent that will help us succeed as we keep emerging from the COVID situation?
I'll help you out there. For me, I think this whole pandemic, what it's actually shown me is that we've actually all become closer and people are more willing and able to help other people out. And I think that following the fight for survival, such as a traditional capitalist model, I think we're seeing, and there's a path of direction veering towards more stakeholder capitalism. And I think for good companies and to generate and to keep and retain good people, for me, it's a little bit, it's about employers who are going to succeed in the future are those who aren't just good at what they do, it's what else do they offer. And specifically, not just Generation Z, but I will hone in on them. They're more attuned to global warming, for example, societal injustices, environmental catastrophe, which we could be facing. And for us as a business and me as a leader, I put a strong emphasis on what does the company do beyond the bottom line in terms of our corporate social responsibility. And from this perspective, what I found, Beth, amongst the team at Wave, we have our CSRs aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. And twice a year, one of our younger team members leads various initiatives, and we produce a brochure that gets issued out. It lands on our website. We make a fanfare on LinkedIn. We send it off to customers, etc. And actually, what I'm finding is, away from the day job, we're a technical business, we're a small business. We don't have the problems such as Louise or Paul or Jane possibly have as a small business. We're very flat in terms of structure, and autonomy is actually pushed and promoted within the business. But what we do, through the CSR that we land, the point that I'm trying to get across here is that it actually identifies leadership qualities from a very young age, because you don't have to be an expert in doing the right thing. So we always look to how can we do things differently, and also at the same time, all these activities linked to our CSR through the Sustainable Development Goals, they're all team building exercises. It's enhancing morale, it's keeping people motivated. And I think those are the type, far from it me to stand here, there's thousands and thousands of leaders better than me and more capable than me. But certainly what I found by centralising culture, that you can't go far wrong. And especially if you link it into what we've all had to go through and endure over the past couple of years. So I think companies who actually align to high quality CSR, who provide autonomy to their team and their younger people, we're going to end up with a very, very good, highly qualified, highly motivated workforce for the future.
Thanks, James. Some great thoughts there. Louise, did you have anything to add? I see you're off mute.
No, I agree with James. I think that's really, really valid points, and it is interesting to hear different viewpoints from different organisations. But yeah, I think for us, certainly kind of meeting the needs of all of our workforce has been the biggest challenge in terms of the variety of roles and the diversity within the organisation. That will again continue as we look and focus on how we can attract that talent and retain that talent in the business post-pandemic. It will be it will continue to be our focus, but one of the main things as well that we've been sort of looking at is mental health as well, and that's such a high priority for everybody, and it's brought it to the forefront of everybody's minds, particularly coming through the pandemic, and that's certainly something that we focus on, is very, very important to us as a business. And I think particularly people, not just those as a group, but particularly young people, are looking at employers and who they would like to work for, and looking at what's important to them when they're looking for a new position or for who they would like to work for. So again, that's something that remains really important for us as well.
Thanks, Louise. And I've seen a little flood of questions come through, so thank you, audience. And I'll stick with you, Louise, if that's okay, because there's a couple aimed specifically at your journey at Arnold Clark. So how long did it take you to implement all of the changes that you've discussed?
We've implemented them very quickly, really. A lot of this came about, through COVID, as we're going through that time, and knowing that we were going to have to adapt and evolve the business. It couldn't work in the way that it did before the pandemic. So during all of that time, these conversations were going on, the focus groups, and getting out there and speaking to our employees, and knowing that we had to put something in place for when things did get slightly a little bit more back to normal. Not that we ever know when that's going to be properly. So I guess over the course of that time, I mean, we actually launched the new approach in July this year. So we've done it in quite a quick space of time, really, and that's why we continue to sort of review it and speak to our employees and make sure that it's working properly. We want to get it right and correct anything as we go along if things aren't quite going as they should do. So we have done it quite quickly, but we've communicated all the way through with all of our employees and our managers, and we've been very transparent with that communication as well, so that all of our employees can see and be aware that there are these 3 different approaches and what they are, what applies to them, but equally they can see what else is going on in the organisation as well. So very quickly, really, is the answer to the question, but we continue to review that to make sure that it's working as it should do. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic, thanks, Louise. And another question for you from Becky. I think you may have touched on this earlier, but just to confirm, so when an employee requests leave, are they paid for their time off, or is that additional to their annual leave entitlement? How does that work?
No, so they can request up to 3 hours, a slot of up to 3 hours, for however, for whatever reason, and they are paid for that. So they are paid for that time off, and there's no requirement to make that time up or do any additional hours to cover that time in the future as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And an excellent question here, which I think I'm going to aim towards you, Jane. Flexible working has been proven to be within a lot of people's grasp since the first lockdown. But how can this be achieved for shift working or frontline staff? So, for example, police, bus drivers, gas engineers, etc. And a secondary point, the increased costs often restrict such changes in culture.
Oh, thank you. Yes, just a very easy question there. So as I mentioned, for us, you need to look at the job design first. I mean, that's the first thing that comes to let you understand what's possible and what's not possible. Because certainly not every job can be done flexibly, but we do believe there is flexibility in every job. And we've got a few examples. So for example, with an NHS clinician, if they've got to be doing surgery at a set time and place, clearly they've got to be where the patient is and the rest of the nursing staff. In order to do that, we wouldn't want them to be doing it remotely. But admin and paperwork can be done in any location and pretty much any time. And probably the kind of admin that somebody like that needs to do might be better done in a quiet space where they're not going to get interrupted. Construction site managers clearly have a lot of paperwork and they have health and safety training along with other kinds of training that they need. Again, that doesn't require to be done in a particular place or at a particular time. It's clearly got to be done. Again, where's the best place and what's the best outcome that you want for them in order to complete that? Army personnel, and all of these examples, by the way, are from our Working Families employer members. So army personnel, there's no daily flex in where and when they work, but there is flex around time off and holidays. And then again, with anybody who's got a place-based work, something where they've got to go to, there'll be a team of people, and that team of people frequently will know what the demands are, when the demands are, and how many people are required at any one time to do that job. So one of the most successful things that can be done is team rostering, where the team themselves agree what needs to be done. All of us rely on our colleagues to get things completed. For me, there is no job in the world where you can say, I did all of this myself with no help at all. Somebody somewhere has helped you along the lines. And for me, that's one of the really important things about those kinds of roles. Talk to the team, ask your people first. And the kind of flexibility that we need isn't necessarily always very expensive. What's obviously expensive is bringing in support for when people are sick, when people are on holiday, if you have an absence within the team for whatever reason. And if we had some flexibility, then those costs could probably be brought down. Within the NHS, the cost of outsourcing, getting locums in is absolutely enormous. It might actually be more cost effective to have more people with a bit more resilience and more flexibility.
So interesting, Jane. Thank you. A tough question, but an amazing answer. And I think there's also something there around anybody in the audience that's looking to create business cases for having wider, more flexible models. Thinking about the costs if you don't do it is just as important as the cost if you do. Paul, I wondered whether you had any examples from your experience in the prison service.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, being a prison officer is not something you can do working from home. But that doesn't mean that there can't be a degree of flexibility. So I worked in the prison service from 1999 to 2002. And I remember in one jail, the officers designed their own shift patterns. So they knew they had to have set cover at certain times and there need to be certain staffing levels, but they were given the autonomy to work that out between them. And what they did was they all had different personal circumstances. So they designed the shift patterns around their individual personal circumstances, but still made it work for the prison. And I thought that was really innovative because it gave the prison officers autonomy in terms of how their work was organised. It still met the requirements of the prison, but it also balanced their, some of them had young families and things like that, which is quite difficult to do with a job that's, it's got rigid shift patterns. So if you can do it in a prison, then it can't be on the wit of man to do it in various other situations, I would say.
Brilliant, thank you, Paul. So I hope those two answers have given everybody food for thought about moving from why not to how can we. So there's another really good question here from Lorraine. Do we have any advice on how we can reinvent our approach to making requests for flexible working that are still legally compliant, but are more conversation and compromise based rather than overly formal? Any ideas on that one?
Hi. Beth, as I'm sure you know, government are currently consulting on flexible working. And if you're interested in responding to the consultation, it closes tomorrow, it closes on the 1st of December. And one of the things that government are asking is, do we want to make flexible requests, requesting flexible work a day one right? That doesn't mean the right to have, it means the right to request. Do we want to reduce the number of times, to increase the number of times people can ask for flexibility? And should we be saying to employers, if they're going to refuse flexible working, they actually have to suggest an alternative? And certainly for working families, when the parents and carers who call us are calling us, the first thing we encourage them to do is try to have that human-to-human conversation with your line manager, with your colleagues, about what might be possible. And also give it a trial. That's one of the most valuable things that you can do, because it's not everything's going to work for everybody all the time. And some things that look fantastic on paper may not actually work in the real world. They may need a bit of a tweak. And the needs of the business are likely to change over time as well. So that for us is the first thing. Encourage that conversation about what's possible, what's not possible, what can be done, because fundamentally it's an employment contract. You know, we're getting paid to do a job of work. The way that we will deliver our best work is if we are valued and we believe we are adding purpose, both to our lives and to the business. So those for me are the things. Have that conversation first.
I love that, Jane. Yes, I'm a fan of an experiment. And I think there's nothing wrong with saying you're trying something. And actually the act of trying it is a way to get feedback and information. If it helps, something that we've done at Investors in People was actually form a kind of mini consultation group within the team. And I asked for volunteers to be part of this group to look at our people policy book, because it is a book, and think about how they could change the language from being quite sort of HR jargony into something that was a lot more user friendly, and that worked for them, and it was in their language. And to be honest, that started as quite a selfish project because I just didn't want to look at the policies. I had other things going on, but actually it became a really good engagement exercise, and it opened my eyes to a lot of the things that were in there that were actually really off-putting, and I never would have known if we hadn't gone through that. So perhaps that's another idea, to get some feedback from the team. Okay, so I've seen there's a question in the chat. It's also come through the Q&A about addressing requests to move back to home countries. Any ideas on that one, offering that kind of flexibility? Oh, Paul's got his hand up.
Yeah, so one of our colleagues is from Canada, and she sometimes goes over there for extended holidays. And she works when she's over there to extend the holiday, and we just make sure she agrees to work UK hours, and she's got a good internet connection, so that's fine. I mean, I can't say to anybody, oh, you can't work. I mean, I live in Scotland, and our head office used to be in London, and I've benefited hugely from not having to travel all the time after COVID, and it's had a massive impact, positive impact on my well-being and work-life balance. So, and I feel happier and more productive at work as a result of that. So, you know, just because someone's in Canada doesn't mean to say they can't do the job. It's a mindset thing. I think it's a mindset thing for managers, and I think if we can all get, you know, have higher levels of trust, then it definitely works. And I think trust is a big part of it. But the question I would ask someone is, if you don't trust your employees, why did you employ them in the first place? Why did you employ untrustworthy people? You know, why do you have to watch their every move? That's something counterintuitive about that from my perspective.
Thanks, Paul. And I suppose it's one of those as well, isn't it, where you have to kind of find out what the realms of the possibility are first, because it very much, and I'm not an expert, very much I think depends on how long they're planning to spend outside of perhaps the UK. Yeah. And with that comes different rules about tax and other legislative concerns. So I think I've seen a few people in the chat saying, you know, take advice. One of the things to consider if you're a CIPD member is that you do have a number of calls available to you as part of your membership to their helpline, included in your membership per year. So if you haven't had a look at that, perhaps give them a call and get some advice there first. Jane, any thoughts on that one?
Yes, Beth, just to say, I agree, there are tax implications. There are also implications. So thinking about our team, there would be implications on GDPR. If we were transferring information, you know, if we had somebody answering a helpline call and they weren't physically in the UK, how are they going to get that information back? But of course, I'm also with Paul in the sense that there's absolutely no reason why somebody's workspace has to be in a particular location, as long as it fits in with the team and as long as they're producing the outcomes. So of course, they're going to be legal concerns and you know, T's to cross and I's to dot, but absolutely it is that trustworthy thing.
Brilliant, thanks Jane. So bang on time, we've got through all of the questions in the Q&A and in the chat. Before we go, I just want to say a huge massive thank you to our amazing panel today. So many great pieces of advice, tips, tricks, and insights that you've shared. So thank you so much for your time. And also to the audience as well, thank you for spending the last hour with us. It's been a really interesting session. It's flown for me. I'm sure it has for you too. And good luck with everything that you go on and try. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.